It was just a normal day for the Griffin family. They were at their kitchen table eating breakfast, except Lois noticed Brian and Stewie weren't eating with them, and she wondered where they were at. And as she thought that, Brian and Stewie ran into the kitchen, huffing and puffing. Brian spoke in a hurried tone. "We need to get out of here. Now. And I mean now," he emphasized, the last part with a serious expression. Peter was confused and jokingly asked, "Well, what the hell did you do? You try to kill the president or something?" Brian didn't say anything, and only looked at Peter with a serious face. He was taken aback by this, and looked at Lois, and they both realized, along with Meg and Chris, that Brian wasn't saying no. That's when a news broadcast came on the news, and the Griffins ran into the family room and watched it. Tom Tucker had a break-in report from the Capitol that a dog and a baby had attempted to assassinate the president, and now a manhunt for them and their family who were suspected of helping was now underway. It then showed a picture of Brian and Stewie, and a look of shock ran across the four of the Griffins' faces. Lois asked, Are you insane? What the hell were you thinking?" Brian responded, "Lois, the government's been investigating us for years. Your random crime sprees, Peter's dangerous and terroristic actions that result in the death and destruction of countless lives and property, Meg's willingness to do anything to be accepted, Chris getting himself in the crazy situations, Stewie's technology, and my adventures with him." Lois didn't know what to say, but before anyone could utter a word, a red dot light appeared above Chris's head, and the rest of the family watched as a bullet from a sniper blew his brains out. Lois and Meg screamed, and Stewie yelled at Brian to get them out of there. Chris's body dropped to the floor, and Stewie grabbed a portal gun and teleported to the sniper and used a pistol to kill him from behind. Stewie saw Brian take the family and use the Petercopter to escape. Stewie looked down from the roof he was on and saw a squadron of military, federal agents, and police surround the house. He used the portal gun to grab a rocket launcher from his armory, and he proceeded to unleash hellfire on the unaware armed forces. Explosions scattered throughout the neighborhood as Brian flew the Petercopter as Meg and Lois cried in the back. Peter was in shock. Brian told him to man the guns as they were being followed. Police choppers were on their tail, and still in a daze about his son's death, Peter manned the minigun attached to the Petercopter and unleashed a torrent of bullets that annihilated the helicopters following them. Stewie finished off the rest of the federal agents, police, and military that was in the area, and used the portal gun to get inside the Petercopter. The Griffins then watched as their house was in flames, with dozens of dead armed military, federal agents, and police scattered throughout the neighborhood. They watched their house, that their family was built in, burned down to the ground from the explosions. Lois and Meg finally calmed down a bit, and Brian told them that they needed a place to lay low and figure out their next move. Stewie told Brian to go to a secret bunker he had in case of emergencies, and once they were there, they would think of what to do next. After a few hours, Brian landed the Petercopter in a forest opening, and the five walked to a patch of grass, and a metal doorway opened in the ground, leading to a stairwell which they followed. Inside, they found an exact replica of the inside of their house, and they were all shocked. They sat in the family room, and Stewie took Brian to the kitchen and told them they needed to end this. Brian understood what Stewie meant. The smart baby had built a stockpile of nukes in case everything went to shit, but Brian told Stewie that was only a last resort. The Griffins spent the next few weeks there figuring out what they would do next, but the government had found them. Stewie looked at Brian as they saw the doorway open and dozens of armed men stormed the bunker. Brian had shown Lois, Peter, and Meg the armory, and they all looked hesitant, but after Chris's death, they understood they needed to do this. A firefight ensued between the Griffins and the armed gunmen, with Stewie unleashing a smoke bomb, with which the Griffins were the only ones who could breathe and see. The family unleashed a storm of bullets onto the gunmen, killing most of them, but the sheer number kept increasing. The smoke bomb's effect wore off. 50 more gunmen stormed inside and were about to kill Peter, but Lois looked at her husband and smiled. Peter yelled at her to stop, but it was too late. Lois ran forward, getting riddled with bullets, but managed to shoot and kill the rest of them, but she eventually fell to the ground, dead, riddled with bullet holes. However, one that no one saw snuck in and snuck up behind Meg and used a combat knife, and before Brian could react fast enough, slit her throat in front of him. After he butchered Meg, Brian shot the last man in the head and watched as Meg fell against the wall and gargled with blood, leaking down her throat and neck, and he watched her eyes fall into the back of her head, and she took her last breath. The last three Griffins held their head down in sadness, but Stewie knew what they needed to do. They were going to access the rest of the launch codes from the president, and then Stewie was going to launch them across the world. Stewie, Brian, and Peter took the last remaining stockpile of weapons and took the Petercopter and flew to Washington, D.C., and eventually arrived at the White House. But a couple jets had noticed them and taken fire, damaging the Petercopter. Peter managed to shoot the jets out of the sky, but understood what was about to happen. He took Stewie's portal gun and pushed Brian and Stewie out of the Petercopter and teleported them inside. As the two yelled, Peter hopped in the pilot's seat and smiled as he looked at a picture of his family, and crashed the Petercopter into the White House, dying in the fiery explosion. Brian and Stewie tumbled against the wall but heard the explosion and realized what happened. It was up to them now. The two made their way through the White House, killing any Secret Service agents they came across. They would finish what they started. The White House became a bloodbath as Brian and Stewie made their way into the Oval Office, killing everyone except the president. Brian kept a lookout as Stewie proceeded to torture the president for the launch codes, and he eventually gave in, and Stewie finished off the leader of the US with a bullet to the brain. Brian and Stewie looked at each other and used the portal gun to head back to Stewie's bunker. They walked through the corpses of the armed gunmen and saw Lois and what was left of Meg. They had a down down-gazed look as Stewie walked towards the computer and inputted the codes, combining them with his own. But before his death, the president predicted the smart baby would do something like this and sent the full might of the United States military after them. Brian looked at a camera screen and saw thousands of soldiers outside, and before they could do anything, the soldiers invaded the bunker and Stewie raced to press the launch button as Brian returned covering fire, but Stewie managed to hit the button and he screamed, "We did it, Brian. Those bastards will turn to dust." But as a bullet grazed his shoulder, he didn't hear a response. He looked over and saw Brian laying dead on the ground, riddled with bullet holes and leaking blood. Stewie smiled as his mission was done, and as he was riddled with bullets. But with his death, the bunker exploded, killing every form of life in a 10-mile radius, wiping out the bunker and the soldiers. The nukes launched all across the world, destroying every major city and country and killing billions. And in the end, the Griffin family had defeated the entire world.